Welcome to the second video in the series Making Data Count, analysing routinely collected data for quality improvement and research. So to start this video, let's look at the difference between audit, service evaluation, quality improvement and research. We'll be drawing on the paper by Twycross and Shorten 2014 for the definitions provided here. When you audit your services, you're basically benchmarking yourself. On the basis of that comparison, you may identify areas to explore in more detail, which could give you ideas for potential changes you could make. For example, here we have a report from the root showing the average TOM score at the start and the end of therapy for one of the given domains, let's say participation. In terms of participation, there is a greater degree of improvement in the root national benchmark than in your service. So do you need to reconsider the interventions or approaches that you're using? And we'll spend more time looking at how one can do this. Another common example of an audit might be a case note audit, where you might look at a sample of your service's case notes to see if they meet the expected standard of what the note should include. In service evaluations, you are looking to make a judgment about your service against a set of criteria. Again, your routinely collected data can be used for this purpose. So if you are using the root, you may look at your service outcomes across all TOMS domains. In the first video, we looked at this chart that showed a substantial proportion of a service's caseload were declining in their participation scores over time. And as a result, they implemented a new language group which seemed to be associated with improved outcomes. This is an example of service evaluation. Now, quality improvement is when you continually use audit, that is using benchmarks, and service evaluation, assessing the quality of your service and making changes when necessary to continually improve the quality of the service you deliver. So let's look at an example. In this chart, you can see that a fairly substantial portion of service users in a service were immediately discharged with no further treatment. That's an issue because it uses up time and resource, and it's unlikely to benefit anyone. It could indicate that the referral process isn't working quite as well as it should. And then you go through a series of quality improvement cycles. So maybe you look at some processes, put in place a new training program while auditing and benchmarking yourself, perhaps finding out what you can learn from other services. As this process continues, you hopefully begin to see a decrease in the number of service users who are immediately discharged. The technical definition of research is the systematically defensible process of inquiry which aims to make more generalized conclusions. In other words, we're trying to discover stuff. You can use large volumes of routinely collected data for the purposes of research. This is real-world data. And we can use it as evidence. If, for example, we were trying a new intervention. Because the root aggregates national real-world data, it's a great tool for research and to inform our evidence-based practice. There are both strengths and limitations to using real-world data for research. One of the limitations in traditional types of research is that the participants being studied can be quite similar, quite homogeneous. But if you are doing research using real-world data, you're including all sorts of service users that may be more medically complex, have a number of comorbidities, etc. And so we're getting a sense of what is happening at the coalface, if you will. But one of the disadvantages of using real-world data is that you don't have a control group, so we might be able to see some interesting correlations when A happens, B happens, but we can't be sure about causation. B happens because of A. So as an example, let's say a service is using a new intervention and their outcomes are better than the national average. But the service is also based in a very wealthy area, and we know that income for all sorts of reasons impacts outcomes. So we can't necessarily be sure that it's the new intervention. You also don't have the granular detail of what the interventions given look like. So let's have a look at an example, using real-world data to develop our understanding of a new patient group, long COVID. Long COVID is an area where, at the time of making this video at least, there is not much research relating to speech and language therapy needs. The root database currently contains data sets of about 100 patients who have had long COVID. We analysed this data to explore what kinds of communication and swallowing needs people were presenting with at speech and language therapy services. And here you can see the range and distribution of different needs. This is valuable intelligence about the symptoms of long COVID, which can inform evidence-based practice. And that brings us to the end of this video.